Welcome back. We spoke about the big, big fat Indian wedding, or the changing trends in the big fat Indian wedding before the break. But now let's shift our focus to something that has really captured everybody's imagination. It's got to do with mental health, and it's got to do with the justice system more importantly. Now, what happened to the young techie in Bangalore, where he allegedly took away his own life, has got the entire debate started on what matters and where the justice system really is. There are no right answers really when it comes to this entire issue. It's not a gender one either from what it seems like. It's got to do with justice system, and we want to understand and get to the bottom of where exactly does it leave us when we talk about mental health, even for men.
Right, there's been a lot of conversation on X, for example, about the fact that spaces need to be created for men to be able to come out and talk about this as an issue. And that did seem like an interesting point. One of the data points that we pulled out was that the World Health Organization says that 1 in every 5 men will face major depression at some point in their lifetime. So this does seem like an aspect we thought was worth discussing, exploring a little further. So we thought we'd bring on to the show Nikhil Taneja. He's come on to the show before to discuss this issue. He's the founder or the co-founder of Yuva. He's also over the last year hosted a very, very interesting talk show with some of the country's leading male celebrities. It's called Be a Man Yaar, and it's all about men's issues, intimate conversations with other men. Nikhil, thank you for joining us here on the show. Nikhil, this story that we've seen play out in Bangalore, there's many legal questions that it's thrown up. But with you today, we wanted to address some of the societal questions and the societal conversation that it's also brought up. So I just wanted to ask you, starting up first, what do you think are the important questions, the important takeaways that this story brings to mind, for you at least?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Toya and Sonal, for having me. I've been deeply disturbed by everything that I have read and seen online. I think most of us have. As you said, I think there is a very important aspect of judicial failure as part of the case.
Correct.
I think that our laws are at this point of time unhelpful to most citizens in India, and I feel like this is across spectrum of genders, right? If at one place we are seeing marital rape laws failing women, at another place we are seeing dowry harassment and other laws failing men. So it's a sad state of affairs. But as you rightly pointed out, there's also a larger conversation over here about men's mental health and men's emotional. It's so hard for men to be able to express themselves about anything on a daily basis. The only time we hear about men's mental health is when something extreme happens. And that is actually very, very sad and disturbing to me. That the only time that there is even a conversation about men's mental health is when you hear of a man taking their own life. It's never a conversation at any other point of time. We don't have an understanding of what men are going through. The stigma for men to express themselves on a daily, weekly, monthly basis is so much that even men only feel compelled to talk about their issues when something this level, at this depth of harassment or at this depth of mental, harassment actually happens with a man. But we are never hearing about this otherwise, and that's something that always kind of bothers me. That why are we not having this conversation a little more often? So there are more men feeling at least compelled to have conversations within each other, within society, so they never have to feel so lonely. Atul Subhash was constantly tweeting at Elon Musk saying that I need help, but I don't know if he had other men in his life to support him or other people in his life to support him that would have avoided a situation like this.
Right. But Nikhil, just as a disclaimer to everybody watching right now, we know very little about the story so far. Absolutely. It's just, we haven't even heard from the girl's side of the family. This is only the version that has come out from what his, dying declaration, so to say, which has gone viral, has been. But the thing that pinches the most about the story is the fact he mentions that his mental health was joked about in a court of law. Isn't that something that should really worry us? Is that what it's come down to? That people, despite all this conversation on mental health that we have in our country, there are still people in judiciary and other places where they're laughing it out.
Sunil, I read that exchange, and again, I think it stood out to me. Now, again, as you said, I don't think any of us are able to verify the veracity of everything that has happened in this case, including the other side. So can't really comment on that. But this is, even anecdotally, this happens quite often. So it's not just this one particular case. And it starts at home. It starts in schools, in campuses. Anytime a man is crying, he's made fun of. Anytime a man has an expression of any kind of emotion, it is almost shut down or judged. I remember I was in an engineering campus, and I remember so clearly that any kind of a man who would have who would even complain about the fact that life is tough over here. I'm being ragged, or it's hard being here. The seniors would violently, showcase to that boy that, oh, you think this is hard? You think education is hard? You think ragging is hard? Here are 20 more slaps, and now you will realize that life, this is not how you have to deal with it. You have to be able to fight back aggressively at life. Any sign of emotion is actually beaten out of men in our country, and mostly it is by other men, and that is what the sad state of affairs is. And then, of course, now we're also seeing that this is moved across genders. So, men are being harassed by almost everyone, everywhere. And this, again, I don't want to paint men as the victim over here, because we are very much also in control, right? So, what are we doing to change the laws? What are men doing to have conversations about this? And we only have these conversations when something devastating happens. What are we doing to fight and change these laws? Of course, we know that there are, our judicial system at many levels is not doesn't help. There's so many rape cases that are filed every day, and yet there is no justice to. And we've seen this over and over again. So we don't care about it, because unfortunately, most of the this is again my theory, of course. The reason that most men don't care about these kind of issues is because these kind of issues are actually out in the public lesser than issues of other genders, and because most of the mental health stigma, or most of the harassment and violence happens against other genders, men don't think that this is our responsibility to really take care of. And then only when men's issues come to light, we are like, oh, why are we not doing anything about the gender? But this is why it's so important for us as men and as human beings to make sure that laws are equal for everybody, that there are gender neutral laws. It's very important that there were laws made for protection of women. At the same time, do we have the right filtrations? Do we have the right asterisk marks wherever there are arguments to be made where there can be misuse of these laws? Do we have systems that check upon the veracity of allegations before we start trials, before multiple cases are filed? We don't have any such conversation, and that's what really again upsets me. And as you said, the thing that happens most often is men's emotions are suppressed to such a large extent that any point of time a man is actually helplessly expressing himself, it is made fun of. I can promise you, and this is my theory, but I can promise you that if this video would have come out, if it would have been leaked without this person taking the ultimate sad step, most people would have made fun of him on social media, saying, oh, look at this man who has this 1.5 hour rant about his issues. Why don't you man up? Why don't you take care of yourself? But only because this person has unfortunately taken their lives are we having this discussion. Otherwise, there are many men who express, and they're constantly shut down.
So, Nikhil, I want to ask you, your conversations on Be a Man Yaar, they are a lot like, and I mean this in the best way, they're a lot like therapy sessions, in the sense that you're having these intimate conversations. You're encouraging men to come out and talk about the things that have bothered them from when they were very young to their current issues too. But I want to ask you, Nikhil, there is a school of thought that believes that conversation in itself can sometimes be a feminine form, and there are other ways that we need to come up with as a society that allow men to express themselves. I just want to ask you, if I simply asked you, what should our audience's takeaways be today? What are the ways to create a society and a world that encourages men to express themselves, be it verbally, be it in other ways? What would you say?
I think we have for very long reduced issues to masculine and feminine, and that's where a lot of these problems start, right? Like even today, I feel, and this is, I don't know if I'll get trolled for this, but I always feel like anytime we talk about men's issues is when there's a woman to blame. Oh, there's a woman who has done something wrong over here. That's why so many men get angry and talk about this repeatedly everywhere. But when there is no woman to blame, when there is no clear villain, men's issues are often ignored and by other men. And I always feel that unless men take up the onus of helping each other out, creating safe spaces independently, we should not be doing this in aggression. We should not be doing this as a revenge or as almost vengeance against any other gender or anybody, any other villain. There do not need to be villains. We can really just create these warm, helpful, kind, safer spaces for each other.
But,
why
but if I
we-
could ask, sorry, Nikhil, how do you do that? What are the keys to creating that space?
Men have to take the onus of creating these spaces ourselves. We have long awaited for somebody else to create this. We have been, and this is a societal problem, right? In our homes at the very beginning of our lives, I think we spoke about this today as well, right? It's mothers who create safe spaces for their children, and even specifically for men. But fathers typically are not, in most cases, and I'm not saying in all cases, but in most cases, fathers are always a little bit distant from their sons. And that's why men don't have this understanding of opening up or being warm in front of their male support systems. They're always looking at female support systems to express themselves. And that is also why when something like this happens, there is harassment to be faced from every side, because they only believe that they can, their empathy should come from feminine spaces, which is not true. It can very much come from masculine spaces, and those masculine spaces can also be empathetic. Why are we only attaching the idea of empathy to feminine spaces, right? And if we take that onus, if we are checking up on our friends daily, weekly, if we are not making fun of other men, if we are not bullying other men, if we are not reducing men's issues to punchlines, anytime a man comes up with an issue, if another man is not saying chal daru peete, or another man is not saying chal theek ho jayega, sleep it off, be a man, if those things stop happening, and if we genuinely just take a moment to ask another man who may be our friend but may be going through something, and being like, are you okay? Can I do something to help? Can I just be there to listen? That's where it starts. It's actually really simple, but it takes a lot of time, effort, courage.
Yeah, but
to be
Nikhil,
to
can
create these
I then say this? Don't you think the solution lies in not having conversations on mental health in silos? Men have their own conversations and women have their own. I think that ghettoism of genders has to stop. It has to be gender neutral. Until the time we don't do it, we'll keep making one enemy of the other.
I feel like that's been happening very often already, Sonal. I feel like all empathetic conversations typically flow between genders or within women, but I don't think the reason that I'm also pointing out very specifically this idea of men helping each other out or just being there for other men is because that is a gap in society. We are not doing that enough. And I also feel like if men are able to, be allies to themselves first, then they will be able to be allies to anybody else. I don't think that we give ourselves as men the space and the courage to be vulnerable to sometimes ourselves also. We are not able to express to ourselves that we are going through something. We are not able to acknowledge to ourselves that, our life may be tough and our emotional state might not be great. And unless we express that to ourselves, and then unless we are able to express it to the closest people in our lives, which often happen to be men, can we then actually say that it's easier for us to be able to talk to anybody else? So the only time we are able to express is when there is a warm a question from the other side, and unfortunately or fortunately that question typically comes from women, and that's why men are more likely to open up to women, which is why so many men are seeking partners and seeking marriage. It's not only about finding a life partner; it's actually finding a partner in your emotional issues. But you're right. I completely agree, and you're absolutely right, Sonal. I feel like in the most ideal version of society, we should be having this question, these conversations everywhere between everyone. But I feel like a lot of it now needs to start between men, because that's the biggest gap in society. If we are able to have those healthy conversations, we will then not have angry conversations that we're having right now.
It's a gap you're already filling to some degree by starting out those conversations. I just want to highlight, Nikhil, though, that you'd said a little earlier, I thought that was beautiful, that it's so important to just check in with the men around you, text them, ask them how you're doing, start having these intimate conversations today itself if you can. Nikhil, thank you for joining us here on the show, for sharing your perspective on such an important issue.
Yeah.
We're going to head very quickly